If everyone is ready, I'll call the June 14th meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Item 2, roll call and declaration of a quorum by Secretary Parker of the Planning Commission. Valerie?
Yes. White,
Here.
Linell,
Here.
Cronin,
Here.
Gurnt,
Here.
Jordan.
Here.
Gail is going to be excused today. Mumper.
Yes. Here. And we do have a quorum. Thank you, Valerie. Item 3, approve the minutes from the May 10th, 2021 joint PC and ETC meeting.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved by Jordan, second by Cronin. On the question? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So carried. Item 4, approve the minutes of May 24th, 2021 joint PC Board of Trustees meeting, Schofield Avenue Quarter Plan Public Hearing.
Move for approval. Second.
Moved by Randall, second by Garen. On the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? So carried. Item 5, approve minutes May 24th, 2021 joint PC Board of Trustee meetings, Weston Avenue Corridor Plan Public Hearing. Moved by Garen,
Second time.
second by Manel. On the question, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? So carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public hearings. And there's a notification in the public hearings that if there is anyone that wishes to make a comment, is there anyone that has filled up written public comment? Valerie?
Not that I'm aware of.
And I did not receive any either. So zoning map and a related request, project number. I'm gonna number 20210187, request from Jess Kufal representing Ryan and Joan Haraldson for a rezone of 6610 Schofield Avenue from B3 general business zoning to B1 neighborhood business district zoning. I'll open the public hearing. Presentation by staff.
So Ryan and Joan Harrison are looking for a rezone. They're looking to build a detached accessory building on their property they own. It's a single family home that's currently on a commercial zoning district, which does not allow detached accessory buildings for residential use, just for commercial use. B1 does permit detached accessory buildings for residential use, and that's what the request is for, to permit the construction of said building. Now, B1, instead of going more single family, this is a commercial area, there's B1 across the street. So while there might not be plans right now to go to commercial, it still allows a smooth transition to commercial, office, personal professional service, such as a hair salon or a small store could fit in such an area.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Emily?
I know the applicant is in the office, or
Pardon?
in the audience.
I was gonna ask next. And comments from the petitioner, please, or his or her representative.
Oh, well, thanks, Emily. Couldn't have said it better myself. It's a scenario where they have, the only option that they would have under the current zoning law would be to add on to the front of their house. And the house is, I would say it's a pretty attractive building, and then any modifications to it would just be a hideous looking construction. So I guess that's why we're here, right? It would be to, I think everybody's advantage to just modify the zoning just slightly, that they could build a more useful building further back towards the rear of their lot. That would be less costly to the customer, but also would be more aesthetically pleasing to everybody driving by. I don't know if they have any plans of doing any commercial activity in the future, but even if they didn't, they would be happy with that. It's kind of unusual shaped lot, as you can see in your map.
So there's a residence there now?
Yes, yeah.
and they're not running a business currently?
No, I think she has I think she watches some kids there once in a while, but no, he works out somewhere else, but he has, like a lot of my customers do, they have expensive collector cars. And they're renting places all over the county to store them, and they drag them back home and back and forth and so on, so. I don't have a design of the building to show you yet, because at this point, we really weren't certain if we could even do this, but it would be something very attractive.
So that abuts on the Mountain Bay trails, correct?
Yes, it is,
Emily, is there a screening at all required for that particular piece of land or not?
I would have to double check that.
Okay. It used to be Highway 29 in Schofield Avenue, so. Any comments I'm sorry, sir, I didn't catch your name and address.
my name is Jess Kufal, I'm with Quality Built Garages in Wausau.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Kufal? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kufal.
Okay.
Sorry, I lost my place. Now, under C, the public comment period, is anyone on social media or present in the audience that wishes to speak in favor or in opposition? Anyone wishing to speak in favor or opposition? Anyone wishing to speak in favor or opposition? Hearing none, I'm going to ask one more question of the Plan Commission members. If anyone has had what's referred to as ex parte communication concerning this hearing, please disclose it, and the commission will decide if it's appropriate for you to continue, sit or recuse yourself. For anybody that has had ex parte communication. Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Item E, recommendation from staff.
Staff recommends approval.
Okay,
Recommends recommendation to village board.
thank you. Item F, discussion and recommendation to the village board by Plan Commission. Discussion, gentlemen. Mr. Cronin? Nothing?
I don't have anything.
Okay, Mr. Garrett? No?
No.
Mumford? Mr. Jordan? Mr. Minell?
Nothing, no.
And I have nothing. Okay, the chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the rezone request and forward the recommendation onto the village board for the June 21st, 2021 meeting agenda.
We have a motion by Mr. Mumford. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Cronin. On the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So carried. Conditional use request under item 7, project number 202000127. Public hearing and action on a request from Jim Pensinel for an amendment to the conditional use permit approved on September 14th, 2020 for an outdoor and vehicle repair and maintenance land use within the B2 Highway Business Zoning District for Patriot Auto at 3702 Schofield Avenue per section 94.16.06.13. The proposed amendment is to reduce the amount of approved material on the exterior of the buildings per section 94.10.03.7. I'll open the public hearing. Presentation by staff.
Just a point of order, we have asked Attorney Edie to be present tonight since this is a request for an amendment to a conditional use permit that was previously issued.
Okay.
And I guess just to make sure we're following proper processes and to keep us on track, I guess.
Okay. Mr. Don, do you feel that Mr. Edie should make a presentation or speak first?
No, not necessarily, unless you wanted to add or enter something initial.
Counselor, anything that you would like to preface this discussion?
I don't think so. I guess the only thing I would, say before we get started here is that this is a quasi judicial proceeding that you're having now. Before it was more of a legislative decision on to rezone something, but a conditional use permit is a quasi judicial proceeding. So if you wanted to go into closed session to deliberate, you have the right to do that. You don't have to do that. But there's a lot of forms that I've seen that are used by planning commissions that they complete, once they have a motion that they believe will pass, that will hopefully have maybe a little more detail than what we're seeing in the motions that are being made. It's important for everyone to understand that the motion is what matters. That's what's approved. That's what's acted upon. So all of the discussion that leads up to the motion is not part of the motion. So that's why it's important that when someone makes a motion, that it's in sufficient detail so that it can be taken down in a way that will create a record for exactly what it is that the plan commission decided. And so again, I don't know if you have a form that you complete to make sure that you're going through and completing all of the steps that you should when you perform your analysis under a conditional use permit evaluation or not. But having a form like that might make sure that we cover all the bases for what would be a complete, I think, recitation of whatever the final decision is. And I only bring that up because it seemed that Mr. Pincelnote, I think, had a different idea on what happened last time. And the only thing that staff can go by is what is in the actual motion itself, not a comment made by somebody during the discussion.
Counselor, so you, one of the things that I see in not just in this committee, in some of our other committees is the term "so moved." As far as I know, any parliamentary procedure says that's really not clear enough. You should state the motion. Because so moved, we've had many discussions here where it's taken a long time for us to formulate the motion. And on occasion, I'll hear "so moved," and it's like, okay, what was moved? And I applaud Valerie for trying to weed that out.
And what I would say is that certain times, that might be more acceptable than other times, but when you're reaching a quasi judicial type decision, like in a conditional use permit situation, you really need to make sure that the motion is detailed, because anything that's not in it is not in it. And you're putting, I guess, a burden on whoever's taking the minute notes to get it right. So I think it would be better if you spend the time formulating the language in the motion so that we can make sure that we get it right every time.
And it's my understanding of most parliamentary procedures is that other members of the committee can assist the person that's making, I'm sorry, I don't mean to point to you, the person that's making the motion with formulating the motion, if it's acceptable to the person's motion.
Yeah.
And that's my understanding also that the chair can allow sufficient time for the person making the motion to actually think on their feet as they're going and to amend it as they're going. And then afterwards, of course, it can be amended.
Sure. Yeah, and I guess I am in favor of maybe, I don't know if we have any of those forms or some of the forms were attached to the information that Jennifer, I know, provided for training purposes. And there's forms on conditional use permits and other issues that might come up that have, that guide you with what you should say in your motion to make sure you cover everything. And I would recommend that you start using those forms, in a situation like a conditional use permit where it's, it might be a little bit more of a lengthy and detailed process than some of the other issues that you take up.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor. Any other staff presentation?
I guess with all the lead-in, I'm not sure what we need to cover here. There's a fairly lengthy staff report that went in front of us today.
I can give a brief synopsis just since we do have a new plan commission member, kind of some history.
Sure.
That'd be, unless everyone's read the staff report.
Anything that will help us make decisions, I am in favor of, as long as it's not too long.
And I did read the staff report,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, I was just gonna brief synopsis of, Plan Commission approved the conditional use in September, but then the elevations didn't come back until October for further approval, at which Plan Commission added the additional exposed fasteners that could be added to the building. However, just as Attorney was commenting, it only talked about exposed fasteners, which staff's not disputing in this matter. It's the elevated material that is being reduced is what is coming to kind of question here. And hence the conditional use amendment to basically reapprove the elevations for the project.
Are there any questions by commission members to Emily?
So the elevations that we approved in October, Emily, showed metal, is that correct?
Correct, it showed metal exposed and,
On the north side and the west wall?
correct, it showed both types.
Okay. So my opinion, what we were approving was the use of metal and those fasteners at that time. So what you're telling me is that the metal wasn't particularly mentioned in the motion then?
So there are elevated there are elevated standards of metal that do have exposed fasteners. So from staff's point of view, the north side is completely replaced to what was considered the non-elevated material, which essentially brings that side down to 0% elevated. And nothing in the motion said that specifically the applicant could go to 0% on that side.
But they brought the
One at a time, please. Mr. Darren?
What are you considering, if they're both metal, what are you considering elevated and non-elevated?
I think there was a copy of the language from the code in this staff report, isn't there? That points out that the metal that is considered to be the higher aesthetic or elevated, as referred to by staff, is copper, brushed nickel, or stainless steel, or I guess other materials, I think, that are subject to approval by the Plan Commission. So in terms of leaving that to the discretion of staff, I guess that's kind of getting to Attorney Eady's point here, that we're trying to interpret something that really should be the Plan Commission's interpretation.
And from the original elevations, the architect calls out that material as a non-elevated. So we took that as a base of metal and would like to see slightly more elevated exposed fastener metal in its place.
Thank you. Mr. Mindell?
I guess if the plans are brought in and there's discussions regarding whether there's a fence on the north side, what's being exposed on the west side and so on, and we approve the plan as being presented with the materials that are there, are you saying that we're supposed to give an identification of what's being approved in a narrative form, or approving the plan as submitted isn't sufficient?
Well, they changed the plan.
They changed the plan.
So there's, so the
That would be
document,
ideal if they had a plan that was attached that you all looked at, then you could reference that, and that would make it simple. Yes,
So
that would
we
be the preferred way every time.
we received plans and those were both, they were recorded on the two documents, the development agreement that was signed by Jim and also the conditional use permit. Then in April, they gave us different plans.
We've had several different versions of the plan over this entire process, if you recall.
I recall, I said, this is the 8th time I've looked at it.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this because I think the first one that we're looking at is 9/14/20 planning commission, correct? And staff had thought this was too plain for a facility. I remember standing up and asking him if he could do a facade.
Correct, this is the one where you guys asked them to put a parapet, so this is
Yep.
what was the elevations you saw.
Yep.
We are, at point of order, we are still in public comment, just,
Correct.
so I don't know if this is something to hold off for further discussion, but at this point, the commission asked for updated elevations to add a parapet. This one is the one you saw in October, where we just talked elevations. They added the parapet, planning commission liked that and approved these elevations with the comment that steel could be exposed. But there was no comment to the reduction of elevated material to be less than what is required by code.
I have a question here. This, on page 173 of this, I think we have a different drawing altogether again.
172.
172.
73, I'm
There's
sorry.
not. So
172.
172 is what they submitted in April,
Okay,
and that's the first time staff has seen this version of the plans. And this is what is currently the proposal from the applicant.
so it's changed.
Yeah.
This is the proposed on 173 because as Mr. Marnell has said, we've seen several different versions of this plan. It's a little hard to keep things straight as far as. Okay,
So is it just that north wall that's?
hang on, we'll get to discussion on this when we're done with the we're in the public comment period, correct? Just want to make sure. Okay,
I guess maybe I should say one more thing while I'm here to do this. You know, really, as long as they meet the standards of the code, you know, and you take into account whatever special conditions you might want to add to it, they're supposed to get the conditional use permit. But you're supposed to follow the code. So if the code requires that they have A, B, C, and it's not discretionary, it says shall. I don't know what the code says on any of these issues. I haven't looked at it in detail. But you said something about something being different than what the code says. So unless it gives discretion and says that you can or may, but if it says shall, then it's really not the purpose of the PC to allow somebody to do something that's banned by the code, okay? That's for the village board to get together and change the ordinance. So, you know, everyone is supposed to follow the ordinances, and your job is to ensure that as well. If you don't like an ordinance, if you think an ordinance is too restrictive or doesn't give enough flexibility, then you have the power and authority in your role to advise the board to make changes to the ordinance. So that's the other role that you're, you know, supposed to do here. So as you're looking at the code, if you think that the code is written in a way that isn't flexible enough, then you need to change the code through the village board, not make exceptions on an individual case. Because once you make an exception, the next person that comes in wants that exception, you don't give it to them, and now we have a lawsuit because we discriminated against them in applying our code. So the idea behind having the code is to follow it. If we don't like it, then we change it.
Jen, isn't there a provision in our zoning code that talks about appeals or changes to the plans commission being allowed?
Not for this section.
Pardon?
Not for this section.
Okay,
So can
Mr. Karen?
Jen or Emily verify if it says shall or may?
All new construction shall have a facade that consists of 50% brick, made of stone, tinted, or textured materials going. So it shall.
It also calls out differences in the elevations north-south or street side, or does it not?
It does.
Mhm.
So on new commercial, which this is commercial, for non-public facing facades, the requirement in subsection A shall remain, but at 40%. Industrial has different. You have
Industrial.
more leeway in industrial.
As I recall, we
We made the
made changes to that zoning code.
That was changed back in early 21.
Mr. Maloney, public comment?
Just before you get to closing the public hearing, this gentleman right here, are you? Brian. You're both Brian with, okay. Do you want to explain the two metals? Absolutely. I mean, I just don't know if you know that if you don't do it before closed public hearing, you can't talk.
Right.
Okay, so I just wanted to make a clarification.
Then Jim can smell is on Zoom too.
Okay, I would hope so.
Well,
In fact, just a suggestion for staff or anyone else. Sometimes it works for us to have a piece of the metal in our hands and take a look at it and see what it is. I mean, I had a question years back about what the heck was ephes. So that helped to have somebody explain that to me. So Where are we? I think I lost it again.
If you wanted to just explain the two metals.
Okay, sure. Name and address for the record, please.
Brian Carlin from Urban Construction.
Thank you.
So basically, correct, we're kind of here to clarify what we can use and what we can't use. It was under Jim and my assumption in the last meeting that there was a compromise, that if we put the cap on, there was a price tag to the cap that we could then go to the exposed fasteners all the way through on the back. And that's the way we read the motion. And so that's what we went with. So the panels, you have the same look. It's not as if 20 feet away, you can see a different metal. It's not. What was presented by Samuel's group, or, excuse me, the architect from Samuel's group, was a concealed fastener panel. It's still metal. It's still 24, 26 gauge. There's no brushed chrome, nickel, or anything about it. It's just a metal panel. So we took that was the original elevation, and then we basically went with a standard metal panel along the back edge, the north side, and on the west side, and on the south between the overhead doors as a trade-off for putting that cap on, because as all of our conversation was talking about the exposed fasteners. There was nothing that we saw in any of the minutes that said we needed to use the elevated material. So then when we presented the plan, it was like, nope, you can't do this. So that's why we're here. I don't know if Gibbons is online, if he wants to add anything.
Sure. Mr. Pincinel, would you like to add anything?
All right, am I there?
Yep.
Identify
All right, great.
yourself for the record, please.
Jim Pensinalt, 5002 Arrow Street, Weston, Wisconsin.
Thank you.
Yeah, so as Brian was stating, at the last planning commission meeting, I believe it was in October of 20, there was discussion, which I understand and respect the fact that discussion does not equal the motion. I think we're all learning a lot in this process, both myself, urban construction, the planning commission, and village staff all. I don't know that we've, as a group, encountered something to this complexity and level of attention to detail that has bound up our process ever in the history of the village of Weston. So I'm not taking this as an attack. I'm taking this as let's learn together, work together, and grow together so that we can get this thing right. And so that the next time we run into something like this, that there isn't conflict and misunderstanding, that it's clear for all parties. The zoning code calls out improved architectural material percentages, and that is how the Samuels Group architect drew. The way the zoning code is written is any hidden fastener. Now, I would ask staff to correct me if I'm wrong, but the zoning code as of September of 2020, now this has changed between then and now. This plan that was drawn by the architect was drawn in September of 2020, September 24, I believe. It states that any hidden fastener metal panel is automatically an upgraded architectural material. A non-conforming material is any exposed fastener material, period. Now, there's interpretation to that about, if we look, the best example I have is Tynan Cellar, because we're all familiar with that building that has those large ribbed panels, those metal panels on the corner of the building. Those are the same, or a cousin to a very similar design to the panel that I have on my building, on the same corner, the southeast corner. Those have exposed fasteners, but are considered by the zoning administrator to be an approved architectural material. I think we just have to make the decision collectively, or maybe the determination or definition of what now makes an improved material and what is not an improved material. My guess is the intent of the zoning code to ban exposed metal fasteners and to ban or to make them a non-improved material is we don't want chintzy, thin, 30 gauge, rusty corrugated tin hanging on every building. There are metal panels with exposed fasteners that look pretty good. I think the stuff on Time and Cellar looks good. I don't know if anyone in the audience or on the board or planning commission disagrees. But that's just one profile of 100 different materials and manufacturers. And there is no book for myself or Brian or even Samuel's group to go out and choose and say, hey, oh, yep. So if we use McElroy part number 1, 2, 3 with an exposed fastener, that's a good metal. We can use that. And I think that's the challenge that we're up against today, is what is considered upgraded conforming and what is not. And that's why we're here. It's also our understanding that from that last meeting, we were told, hey, take the hidden fasteners off, put exposed fasteners on, which is exactly what we did. So that's going to change the metal panels that are on there. And obviously we changed it exactly as they asked us to. Because there were two different metals, it changed the configuration slightly of the southeast corner of the building. As you were the southwest corner, the way the brick was, it wrapped around in a different shape. If you look from picture A to picture B, we changed that so that it looked more uniform and had a better visual appearance. So now if you look at the south elevation, it has a solid column of brick on the southwest corner. Whereas if you look at the original elevation from the architect, that was abbreviated so that there are two different metal panels there. And if you go to the bottom right picture in that same elevation, that's a different metal right there where the hand is in the top right of that elevation and the left half. Now it's all the same metal. So it doesn't make sense to do this jigsaw puzzle. Let's make it look like a good attractive building. That was the only reason for changing the location of the brick. It's still the same square footage, plus or minus whatever fraction of a percent to make it an even row or course of brick. I mean, we're not going to cut every brick by 1/16 of an inch to make it the exact same amount of square footage, but it's very close.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Pincinel. Any questions for Mr. Pincinel? Okay. Just as a reminder before I close, Mr. Garrett, go ahead.
Does he still have the color, or does the staff have the colored rendering that they submitted in?
We've not received an updated color. That was one thing, talking with Jim and Brian, was that there was gonna be some color changes with different metals, but we never received anything.
Do we have the existing one that he showed us prior?
We do.
It may take a while to find it.
I'm just wondering why we don't.
I have a printed copy here, if that's helpful.
it was when we looked at this before, I remember Mark making a comment how attractive the building looked, so. I was just wondering why it wasn't
Find it in the Z drive.
put in the,
In the Z drive?
Yeah.
wasn't put in the packet here. Cause I think that was what we requested, yeah,
As well with the parapet.
I think it looks pretty sharp.
Does anybody need to see this?
I think,
So this is the current proposed design.
Correct.
Michael's gonna try to find it to put it up on the screen.
This is not, we do not have that all the way through there.
Okay.
We don't see the changes really in the north wall.
Do you have a view of the north wall with a color?
We did not, we haven't.
Yeah, the plans had variation of look on the back, not a total, single, I guess, single look based on what was submitted to the plan commission.
So you said on the far left, that brick is gonna go all the way up?
Correct.
Okay, so it'll match how the rest of the building looks.
So I will point out it is less percentage though of elevated material on that side. It's the same amount of brick, but it still doesn't meet the 40% that needs to be on that side.
On which side?
on that west side.
Isn't the west side an expansion?
That was yes, exactly.
The expansion was taken off for the final approval. It was on originally, but was taken off for the final.
The reason the expansion was removed is because the way the zoning code is written, expansion walls are not exempted from any variation from the zoning code. I still would have to make it meet the improved architectural materials and tear them off when I expand. That is how the zoning code is written.
No, it's not. So if
In
it's an
commercial
expansion wall-
areas. Please pull up that zoning code.
Apologies, you are correct. Industrial allows for that.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Pincinel? Okay, before we close the public hearing, I want to again mention that if anyone has had any ex parte communication concerning this particular issue, please disclose that, and the plan commission will decide whether it's necessary for you to abstain from further comments or voting. Anyone? None? Anything else? Oh, I'm going to close the public hearing. Just before we begin this is the discussion part where the plan commission adjudicates the case, and it's their discussion amongst them, not a debate with either the petitioner or people that are in the audience. Everybody's had their opportunity to make their presentation. That's why.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, you did not call 3 times for closing the public hearing, just to be consistent with the last public hearing.
Okay. I don't know how I can take that back though. So, yes, is there anyone else that wishes to make public comment? For or against? Social media, Michael, anyone? Anyone wishing to make any comment for or against? Anyone wishing to make a comment for or against? Hearing none and none being available on Zoom. Again, I will close the public hearing.
Thank you.
Item E, recommendation from staff.
Staff did not give a recommendation. We presented our information in the packet and leave it to Plan Commission.
Okay, thank you. Item F, discussion and action by Plan Commission. One at a time, please.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes, you may.
There is a section of the code, if Michael can bring it up. It's 9410. 9410-03 underneath the design standards for multifamily and non-residential buildings. Number 16 is the waiver or modification of standards that you're thinking of.
Okay, thank you.
It does have to meet those 3 things, so you would have to determine that it meets at least one of the circumstances present
For a
waiver.
waiver. Could you?
What are those 3 things?
Yeah, those are my
He's
He's gonna bring them up.
He's gonna try to find it.
It says the applicable site plan approval authority, which is you guys, because, is the plan commission because you, approved the original conditional use permit. You may waive or modify any of the standards in this section if at least one of the following circumstances is present. Letter A is supplemental design elements or improvements that exceed normal standards are incorporated into the project. B, restricted building materials are used as limited decorative elements on a building facade that contributes to its architectural design. C, undesirable site or building conditions will not be visible from the public right-of-way and or adjoining properties. So those are your 3.
Those are the 3 conditions
Those are the 3 circumstances.
for
This has to be at least.
granting a waiver.
Has to be at least 1. Is that correct?
Yep, so you have to determine that it
Which one
meets
is?
one of those and which one that is.
So since it's on the back of the building and the side of the building, it's not being viewed.
Right,
Adjoining properties,
that's what we decided.
Right.
but it doesn't meet C though.
So why would we have the terminology if we have adjoining property? Everybody's adjoining everybody's property.
if you have a buffer of trees, if you,
Right, we talked about, at the hearing, I believe we talked about the cemetery that's there and the pine trees that would never be touched and on the
West side.
property, correct?
On the west side.
Right.
So being that we didn't need anything on the west side because of the trees, can we have any clarification on the back or any give and take with the back side? I personally think it's nice looking
So,
with the facade that's on the front, whether it's, but I can't,
I was under the impression there was gonna be a fence along that backside. Is that not the case?
that change, Jim.
You're talking, I think you're referring to the enclosure for the dumpsters.
No,
It was
For the dumpsters,
Correct, 6 foot high, chain link fence with vinyl slats.
to screen the dumpster.
Brian, it was shown on the site plan earlier on, but it's not shown here, and I think we use that fencing as a determination
Right.
earlier on that why it met. Is that fence gonna continue to be there?
That 6 foot high, or that, yes, it is for the dumpster area, correct?
it
far
does
is-
not cover the whole fence, the whole back.
I understand that, but I don't think he has to have 100% of his back done, does he?
No.
Yeah, so how much distance does he have?
34 feet,
34, and what is
or
it?
the 87 feet, 87 feet.
Covers 39% of the building.
He needs 40? Jim, or Mr. Penasalt, are you available?
Yes, I am. So that is correct. There will be, the dumpster enclosure is significantly larger than a standard issue dumpster enclosure.
Just a reminder, this is discussion between the planning commission.
I can't ask the owner of the property a question.
You can, it's just out of order.
Okay, well, I was just gonna ask him if he would have a problem moving the fence like 2 more feet to make his 40%.
Yes, I can do that. I also want to make the planning commission aware that there is, the tree line starts, which cannot be disturbed. It is part of that cemetery property. That starts farther to the east of the dumpster enclosure. 3/4 of the building will not be viewable from the public right of way. You will be able to see the dumpster enclosure, and that is all. Anything beyond the dumpster enclosure to the west, you cannot see on the building. From public right of way. It can be viewed from inside Mr. Emmerich's property. It can be viewed from inside that cemetery property.
Almost half of the building's gonna be covered by those trees in the back, which is part of the cemetery. If I remember right,
Correct.
it's P-shaped.
I thought we went through this enough to have the fencing and the trees on the west side of the building and also back with the fencing on the back. I thought we met requirements.
we did. I agree with that. And,
Do they make requirements on the south side and the east side?
Yes.
and he added the parapet as we
Yes,
asked, so is that not viewed as supplemental? Something in addition to what is required?
That's plan commission's decision.
and as well as the west side that not being viewed. And I think, Emily, he's not 100% up to par on the west side, right? Was short a little bit, did you say earlier?
He's a little short on the west side. I believe it's like 32%. It's in the report.
But ultimately, it can't be seen, so it's shielded, so we can, even if he's off by 1% in the back, I mean, I'm sure we can give him some credit for the west side.
And that's fine. So, I mean, coming back to the question, these plans are different than the way the motion was worded. And, you know, moving forward, we can definitely review motions, make sure we're catching things as they're coming out. But just based on the way it was worded there, this is the procedure, and state statute requires amendments come through public notice to be re-reviewed by plan commission.
Mr. Cronin, do you have anything?
No. I'm just listening.
Okay, Mr. Mumford?
No.
Mr. Jordan?
Well, I guess I'm confused then, because to my way of thinking, when we approve this with steel with exposed fasteners, we were in fact accounting for
West side to be shielded.
yeah, and again, our intention was, as Urban has so shown this, I'm trying to understand what then in the motion do you have an issue with, you know, and when I say that, if in fact we made this, are you saying that we didn't call it out as an exception? Is that what we're missing, Emily?
Correct, I would have liked to see a motion where it said, approve the elevations with a reduction of blank percentage.
On each, actually,
You know,
probably each
this
side
percentage on
should
this
call
side,
it.
this percentage on that side, would have been the cleanest way.
So hang on.
So in the motion then, if we cite the exception, do we necessarily have to spell all of this out in exact percentages? You know, when we're approving this?
It's the cleanest way.
Some of the issue is we didn't have the correct copy at that meeting of the plans. So that was some of the difference. Normally you would have one that you'd be approving, but there was a change in it from when your initial approval. We didn't have that at that meeting. And now we have a complete different one.
So if you have a plan that you can refer to in your motion, that takes out a lot of what you have to say. But if you're gonna determine that there is an exception that applies to the code under one of those three items, A, B, C, then your motion has to include that, and there has to be analysis of why that particular exception should apply that's agreed to by the PC. That's part of the motion.
Hang on, Mr. Garrett, wait, we'll get to you. Mr. Don.
The approval of the exposed fasteners was not debated by staff, as that was stated earlier. I guess, but now Brian from Urban indicates that because of making the change to exposed fasteners, it changed the material. That was not made clear that I recall in that meeting. So I think that's part of the reason for bringing this back, because that north elevation changed so much. And I guess we still didn't have a color rendering of it either, but I think that was the main thing, changing that north elevation and the uniform look across the entire back.
So the idea of using exposed fasteners, by my experience, and maybe unfairly to you, is that automatically changes the configuration of the panel. I mean, that's a given in the industry by people, known by builders, that I can understand that I wouldn't expect Emily to necessarily know that without having some experience of that. So that's my mistake in not making sure that you understood that by changing to exposed fasteners, the panel has to change.
Mr. Maloney, even though you're not applying, but you're alternate, you have a comment?
Well, to the point of what Joe's saying here and what Urban Construction here, Brian, right? Correct. I mean, in your thought, these two panels, the only difference is one has exposed and one is not. You said 20 feet away, you would be able to tell the difference. Correct. So what we approved initially was hidden fasteners. You switched it to what, just we talked about with Joe, to exposed, which of course changes the panel. But it changes the panel to be what the enclosed one was. Correct? Okay. So tonight, do we have to spell it all out, or do we have a complete set of plans? And the commission could say, I'm approving with as these new set of plans are. Would that cover it?
I agree with that.
Okay.
We didn't have that.
I know, I've heard it 3 times tonight, that they didn't have it and they didn't have the color, I get it.
But it was a
was like talk, there was some, we put the parapet on if you do
Hang on,
this, so at the
hang on.
time, we didn't have a plan.
Please.
I remember that meeting, we actually stopped Jim from talking on his way out. We said, you have what you want, stop talking. Almost in jest, you know, to not keep it going, so I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Marnell?
No, it's just disappointing that we're spending so much energy on something that we've, or at least I felt was already approved. I mean, adding in 2 feet of fence to the back in order to hide enough of the back of the building that nobody's gonna see, or to measure the amount of trees to the northwest of the building. It just seems like perhaps that 40% should be changed. Or whatever, if that's what we're stumbling over here,
Well, I think this leads to the point where our discussions get so involved that we lose track of where we are. And it's very difficult for anyone to just state the motion that covers all the discussion.
I
Mr.
agree.
Pierre?
Do we have recordings of these?
Sure.
So how can't we go back and listen to what we talked about? Because
But
it's,
you have to have it in the motion. Yes,
I understand, so we've discussed that, so why don't we just make a motion and get this thing on here?
so some of the point that I want to bring up is there's 2 documents that have been recorded and need to be amended. So
Okay,
that's the other thing, is that there's 2 documents that are recorded down at Marathon County. So we have to amend those. So we need to have that paper trail. So that's why it's back before you.
so Jen, if I can ask, what do we have to amend on those? Just a new plan?
Correct. And
We're
that
adding,
originally
we're adding a
drafted-
revision, we're adding a
Or
revision.
actually, it was Attorney Vanderwall, wasn't it? Didn't the original development agreement, those are attached to the conditional use, is attached to the development agreement, and the conditional use was recorded. So we'll have to work with Matt.
The conditional use and the developers agree.
Yes, so we have to amend
We
both.
basically have some revised plans. I don't think we really changed any requirements because we discussed that on the west side, he was covered. On the north side, his fencing was there and shielded. So I mean, really all we're doing is discussing, here we got a new set of plans. And it looks like to me like he's added some more material to it than he's taken out. But I understand the clarification on the motion.
And the plan commission was the original site plan approval authority, so that takes it out of the hands of staff.
I think the staff is looking for something that's, they don't have to go back and try to guess what we're saying later on. And it does require 2 changes, and I'm sure whatever changes we make through a motion, specific enough to make those changes, they will ensure that gets taken into the county and to the developers agreement. Correct?
Correct.
I'll make an attempt to make a motion here.
Take your time.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed plan submitted by Brian Carlin on 4/15/21, which shows an updated plan set that will have some 39% or on the west elevation that really doesn't require all of that percentage due to the fact it's got shielding of trees. And also a condition that we approve the rear or north of the building because 39% of it, or close to 40% of it, is already shielded with a fence for his dumpsters and or any exterior storage that he will be utilizing there.
Are you done? Anybody have any comments?
Yes, it was 32% on the west side, not 39.
I'm sorry, 32% on the west side.
And I'm actually gonna correct my number, it's 30.
Okay, 30% on the west side. And then
So many numbers.
obviously, we don't need to address the exposed fasteners, I don't believe, because that's already out of the code, right? Or that's not it, that's not included, so.
You're approving these plans
Yep.
essentially.
Was there a mention about extending the fence an extra 2 feet? Wasn't there?
I don't know that we need to because we're already having him.
Okay, let's just go to, in case.
We're already having him go over on his material on his west side.
Okay, just wanted to mention because it was brought up in the discussion. Is everyone clear on the motion?
Which one of the 3 exceptions are we going to apply? Because that's the other part of it.
Okay, those three, remember those three exemptions, Mr. Garrett, would you care to cite one?
I'm not sure we need an exception, do we?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do,
16.
it's a waiver.
If you're under 40%.
Following 16C.
We're really not under 40%, are we?
Yeah, you are.
Well, we're under 40%, but we're meeting it by having the fencing.
That's what's.
I think number C is the one you're looking at.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
see.
Yeah.
Okay,
So that,
I didn't know that we had to have one of those.
Yeah.
Okay, so we should cite the reasoning for this petition is, or motion is,
waiver or modification.
undesirable site or building conditions will not be visible to the public right of way and or adjoining properties. There you
So
go,
you're modifying
the motion.
number 7, approved materials. 7 and 8.
And if the parapet was extra, then A might apply
And you
too.
could cite, I think, A and C.
We did ask him to put more into it to give it a little, because staff thought it was a little plain, all right?
If
So we
that, if the
suggested,
parapet wasn't necessary, then that could have, A could apply too if you guys thought. it should.
List
A and
16,
C.
A and C.
A and C, thank you.
Okay, is that straight, is everybody clear on this now? Should reread it.
Want me to say that?
Read it back, though.
No, Valerie, okay, should reread it. No, I'm just saying Valerie should. Hang on. We got-
Valerie.
Valerie,
Yes.
I want to do it either.
Warren, just point of order, do we need a second before she reads it back?
no, because as a chair, I'm trying to clarify.
Okay, I just want to, just making sure.
Okay,
Valerie,
well,
because the chair is actually supposed to state the motion, and I don't remember if referred.
yeah. See, approving the proposed plans submitted on 4/15/21 will have 30% on west elevation and does not require due to trees condition on approval. The north being 39%, I don't know, I missed some of that. And because shielded by dumpsters,
Fence.
Fence.
Fencing.
And you cited the two conditions in the waiver.
You're reducing the requirements in, let's see, 941003, number 7, approved materials, and number 8, with, based on the waiver or modification of standards that's allowed in 16A and C.
A and
That
C.
essentially was it.
That's it. So that's how, I mean,
You have the plan, so you don't need to really talk about percentages, just talk about
Right.
what sides of the building do not meet the code and the exceptions that you're applying to approve the plan are A and C.
Okay, so are you clear on the motion that's repeated back to you?
Yeah, well,
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Garrett, second by Mr. Jordan, to approve per the motion made by Mr. Garrett. On the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So carried. Thank you. Communications, item 8. Public comment. Is there any public comment from the audience and or on Zoom or other social media, Mr. Wodolski? No.
Nobody else?
We have no written correspondence for public comment either. Valerie, any written comments?
not that I received.
Okay, thank you. Item 10, unfinished business, project 2021-0077. Clarification of May 10th, 2021 action on Hinter Springs subdivision preliminary plan. Staff, is there something you wanted to add other than what was in the packet?
Nope, I guess my only clarification would just be this is slightly different from the previous item in clarification of motion, as this was not gone through with a public hearing conditional use permit. So we're just looking for clarification, as there was a piece missing in regards to relation to the sidewalk between those lots over the A&R agreement. There's been discussion about the oddity of it, so wanted to just get plan commission's clarification on it.
So the,
Joe, it was you and me, you made the motion.
Right, so Emily is A and R has an easement, and
Yes.
so the developer actually owns the land. I have the same situation at my house, so I'm familiar with that. It would have been my intention, because the developer actually does own the land, that he would in fact continue the sidewalks across the easement area in accordance with A and R's requirements. And so you can cross the pipeline with a driveway or a sidewalk or other things as long as A and R is in agreement. And they have to be dealing with that already in order for the street to cross the
Yes.
pipeline. So I don't see the sidewalk as being,
I think what you're referring to, Joe, is to follow instead of, remember, we had them cutting across all of those lots.
Yeah, so this red line is the one that's in question.
Yep.
Is whether or not the sidewalk between these two streets here would be required.
Yeah.
And if my memory serves me correctly, the way that we were the compromise was if you put in sidewalks on both sides of the street, we weren't gonna require you to keep that
right,
sidewalk.
yeah, so my intention was that he would put sidewalk across the pipeline.
Yep.
Parallel to the street, but we wouldn't require that he put that sidewalk
between the lots,
between the, yeah,
two streets.
right.
You did ask for that little piece to come out the birch, right?
Yeah, so this was included.
So that'll,
The small stub that,
that'll give
yes,
us
that one was there,
that connection,
as far as I recall.
so you don't have to go all the way around that, big hairpin curve.
Well, that's quite a sidewalk there.
Trying to color code it here.
As long as it's not more than 3 colors.
So the green line here was included, the red line
It
wasn't
was not,
referenced one way or the other.
yeah, except that the sidewalk has to be parallel to the street.
Yeah.
Across A and R's pipeline in that area.
Okay,
So do you need a motion on this, or are you just looking for clarification?
just clarification, I don't
Okay.
think we need a motion. The engineer was asking, and we were listening to the recording again and it went kind of both ways and leaning towards removing it, but the motion did not, so perfect. So not between the lots, oh, I lost my numbers, 16, 15, and 31, 32.
Yep, there was this, I read through the minutes, there was discussion about eliminating that particular,
Which one?
is that all, you-
That's all we needed for that.
okay?
So
Do you want
perfect.
an official motion on that?
Do
Just
we
so-
need an, I don't
I suppose not, okay.
think it's
I
just,
mean, you can take it, it probably doesn't hurt to have it sent over here, but it goes to the board next week.
I don't even want to make a motion.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion that, the sidewalk is excluded on lots 31, 32, 15, and 16 that would connect to the two sides of Inner Springs Drive, but that the sidewalk is to be included between Inner Springs and Birch.
So you're removing the proposed 20-foot ingress, egress easement.
No,
And so they're keeping the green line in and removing the red line.
Right.
Because they don't say anything about sidewalks on here, so
Yeah, because this
are
is
you
the plan.
keeping the easement or?
Yeah, I guess that, yeah, that is
So
a
that's
question.
the clarification, because that's an easement, it just says easement.
Well, the
Well, it belongs to-
easement has to stay there.
does it belong to A&R?
The easement belongs to A&R.
Yeah, that easement has to stay there,
No,
John.
this is their easement.
No.
They don't have it
there's a
across the.
separate easement on
There's
top
two
of the
easements on
A&R
top of each
easement.
other.
There'll be the A&R easement.
So to clarify that, is that an easement that they're asking for a sidewalk to go across?
But just, I mean, it doesn't specify that it's.
Got that.
So
I think that was part of the original
it was
plan,
in the original.
or the
plan.
original discussions were. If we're gonna have, if there was walking,
That, to get an easement from A&R for that, they didn't go ahead and do that already, did they?
No, this is all proposed still.
Oh, yeah.
I think that,
That's fine.
oh, but I think on the original discussions, when it was brought in, by staff originally, staff had talked about having that sidewalk there just for a walking path or walking trail or whatever it was, and,
Yeah.
and obviously,
So Jen, there's not an actual easement on top there currently. It's just A&R's.
No, they're proposing one with this right now. It says that there's an easement there. So you'd be removing that 20-foot.
Yeah, for all we know, they wouldn't even get one, right?
Yeah, well, exactly, Keith, and that's where I was going with that.
Is that a non-exclusive easement or an exclusive easement?
There's not a lot of information on the easement
They don't-
listed there, so.
I
it
know
just
they
says
get really
that-
upset if you build any permanent structure really close to those.
Are you making a new motion or are we making a motion to amend the previous motion?
I think it's a clarification.
Okay,
A motion to clarify our intent.
Remove the easement between 16,
Sidewalk.
16.
Remove the sidewalk.
We don't care if they have an easement there, right?
Right.
But right now, the plat doesn't really talk about sidewalk, and I do apologize, have been using the verbiage sidewalk. So currently the plat just says easement for future potential sidewalk. So really, you guys would be removing the easement for the potential of a sidewalk,
Yes.
yes,
so the easement.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Garrett. Is everyone clear
No,
on?
motion by Jordan.
Oh, sorry. Well, so we have a motion by Jordan, second by Cronin. Is everyone clear on the motion?
Yes.
Staff is clear?
Removing the
Yep.
easement.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So carried.
Clear. Jeez.
We'll get there.
I was just trying to make a joke.
Wow.
So therefore, our lesson is to try to make sure we get our motions really clear. New business, item 11, commissioner training. Who has this?
I guess I can start. So I just put this on because our agenda was a little bit later. I did send out an email because we have some new members and then also because Lauren and I had sat in on this meeting and hearing conduct and webinar, and I thought it was very good. I learned a lot watching it. And have actually given it to the department directors because there's other departments that deal with public hearing processes and things like that. So I know in talking with President Maloney before, he had asked questions too about when, people can talk. We've had situations even in the case of when we were talking about the plat last time for Hinner with, residents talking, asking questions during the meeting. So I guess, did everyone get a chance to look at all of this? If there was any questions, I guess I want to just talk about future agendas on making it easier for you guys to kind of differentiate between when you're in that quasi-judicial phase of your job and when you're in more of the planning commission role of just general planning commission. So I did include some agendas that are out there, some examples. You can see Cronenwetter actually separates their hearings out and actually adjourn them and then go into their meetings and they take action later on. When I first got here, we used to do that. They used to be under new business when we actually took action. We moved them just so that people didn't have to sit and wait
Further down.
meetings all the way through. Because
And if you notice, I have incorporated some of those changes, tried to incorporate some of the changes in our procedures, so.
I would make a comment. I think this is very informational. I wish I probably would have had a little bit, and Jen, I think you had mentioned you had sent some of this to me, but I don't remember ever seeing like a planning commission handbook. I never got sworn in with the gospel and put the black stuff on my forehead or anything like that. But this was really good for me to see a lot of this, and I haven't gotten through all of it. I'd like to, actually, I think I talked with you a little bit today, Jen. I'd like to have a copy of the planning commission handbook. I think it's a great idea for.
You want a paper copy?
When you first get into one of these meetings, and Joel, I asked you too, it's overwhelming. You don't know any procedures or how to follow rules and regulations of a meeting. But, no, I think it was a lot of good information and I really enjoyed taking a peek at it.
Well, I viewed the videos, Jen, and found them informative. In the examples though, clarify for me what you're trying to show by the various examples in specific, so I see in one, there's actually an announcement asking if any plan commission member has had conversation, what did you do?
Ex parte.
Ex parte. So then is that with every item then?
Only during the hearing, as far as I understand it.
It's only quasi judicial type hearings that you have an obligation not to have ex parte communications with anyone that might be involved. So if anybody comes to you and says, I've got a conditional use permit that I'm gonna have before you, and they talk to you about it, you should tell them to don't talk to you about it, because if they do, then you can't vote and you can't participate.
So
That's a quasi judicial. Now, if it's legislative, all right, so if it's a rezone, let's say, or if you're looking at changing the code and looking at things like that, that is
Different.
legislative. So you don't have any, you can talk to whoever you want about good ideas for how to make Weston a better place and have better ordinances. You can talk to your neighbors, anybody you want about that. But if you're gonna sit as a judge, and that's the difference, because you have to listen to the evidence, you have to look at the drawings, you have to decide, do they meet the criteria that the ordinance lays out? And if they don't, do I wanna find that one of the exceptions apply here? You have to be like a judge that it's not being influenced in any way by the public or by the person that wants the conditional use permit.
So two commission members can or cannot talk?
Depends what the situation, I could maybe clarify
Right.
this. When I was on the planning commission previously, there was an Airbnb issue that came up. They wanted a conditional use permit. They happen to live very close to me and you.
Yeah.
And some of the other neighbors came around one day and knocked on my door, and I opened it up and they're, hey, we're here to talk to you about this. They didn't know I was on the planning commission. They just were coming around to canvass the neighborhood and said to me, this issue's coming up in Weston. I said, I'm very well aware of it and I can't discuss it with you because I'm on the planning commission and I'm going to be voting on this exact issue. I said, and then I disclosed it at the planning commission meeting and said, this came up, here, was what happened. And I explained that I couldn't discuss it. I didn't discuss it. And so I was still able to vote on that.
Yes. Right. And that was the proper procedure to do.
Now, because they were getting a conditional use permit, I couldn't discuss it with them. Now, if it was something like you had said,
They wanted to change the ordinance for Airbnb.
yes,
Yeah, right,
then that would be something, yes.
correct.
Mark, you had a question about,
Well, that's pretty close to what I was just asking about, whether or not commission members could talk. And I think this applies to commissions, not to committees, correct? Or both?
All the groups, if you have to be careful about what's called a walking quorum.
Right.
Right, but just keep in mind that when you're, quasi judicial, whenever you're a judge, you don't talk to anybody.
Right.
You come and listen to the evidence and you call it the way you see it, umpire, balls and strikes, right? That's when you're a judge. When you're not a judge, then you can talk to anybody you want. You can talk to another member as long as there's not a walking quorum, or you can't block, I guess, something if there's, if it requires a supermajority to.
Talking about a negative
And
quorum.
a negative quorum would be enough people that could block something. They can't talk about, issues outside of a public meeting.
so can I, as an example, if I have a question or, I call Jen, because she's not part of us, right? So I can communicate with her about something on this. Can I communicate with Joe Jordan on anything to do with this chapter 62 planning commission or your handbook? Can I communicate with Joe as another planning commission member on that item?
You can, but you probably, it's better to do it in meetings, with the public present. But if it's just two of you and the two of you can't do anything because there's.
Or stop anything.
Yeah, or stop anything, then you could talk,
So just so everyone, and I keep butting in here, but, so the walking quorum is Joe and Gary talk. One of them takes it to a third member. And then one of those three, or those two, then take it to a fourth.
Yeah.
That's a walking quorum, correct?
Enough to form.
enough to either negatively or positively affect.
Right,
Okay.
right. And you don't have to be all meeting together if
Right.
you're talking,
Right.
you know, if it's, you know, I'm talking to you and you're talking to him and, you know, once a group forms that could pass something or block something, that's illegal. Okay, you have to.
And that's why it's always good for you to get communications either to Jen or to staff members.
And you don't want to email each other as a group, okay?
Well, or, I mean, if you were to say, like, I'll be honest with you, I sent a message out to Steve and Joel. And Steve said, hey, take a peek at the planning commission, packet and look at the handbook, the planning commission handbook thing. And get yourself sharpened up on that, make sure you spend the time on it. Now, is that a problem?
No, I don't see that as a problem, because that's,
Matt's just nodding his head.
Well, I think you want to stay away from, you know, from anyone arguing that you're a walking quorum. So I would just try to not communicate by email.
Well, part of it, there was a lot involved there.
oh yeah.
I mean, that what Jen sent out is a lot of hours of time.
Right.
You know, so when I sent it out Saturday morning, I'm thinking, sometimes, you know, as business owners, we don't get home till 8, 9 o'clock at night. And then you got family and kids and then you're in bed and a lot of times we don't have. So I know Mark had requested these to come on Wednesday instead of like, Fridays or
Right.
something like that. So we could have a little bit more time. But sometimes during the week it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And it's Saturday night or Sunday night or something like that. And you're trying to come in, but this was a lot of information. So that's the only reason why I did.
And if I can just say one more, because then it'll save me a question later. I have no issues with any of this, except for the signature. And I know you know that, and I know past administration knows that. I have a question about signing. And does everyone else have to sign in their jobs here at the village? I mean, does a truck driver sign that he won't hit mailboxes? I mean, you know, and I'm kind of acting like a smart butt, but I think there's enough laws and enough state statutes out there to govern everything we're doing in this village, city, or town that I don't think we have to sign. And I mean, the last time I signed something was when I went to Weight Watchers. And I gladly signed that, you know, because it shamed me, okay? That's the truth, you know? And well, when I got married 15 years ago too, but I mean, I make a practice not to sign. And I think in this deal here, it's just gonna save me another question, Chairman White. And, cause I am gonna talk about that on the signing. The signing thing is a big deal for me.
Counselor, would you like to address that?
I was just gonna ask.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the signing thing is. What do we?
Well,
It was just old information, so those two things.
One is the code of conduct.
Yeah, those were things that came out of Commissioner's.
I thought you signed the code of conduct.
And that hasn't been signed for a number of years,
I haven't passed.
but it's more or less the procedures.
Yeah.
I am the bad guy, and Wally, we were the two bad guys on the not signing. But it didn't start here with this commission. It started with the board of trustees and our past administrator. And he wanted us to sign things as a board of trustees, another level of the way to act or proceed, and I viewed it as control, and so did Wally.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of things that the state has put in place that controls our actions. They actually have a code of, and there's isn't there a board that's governed as a oversight over government activity, small municipal government. The code of conduct is one of them, the other is ethics, both in the state statutes.
So have we, just to make, I haven't looked at the agenda, is this noticed up to talk about things like
Yes.
ethics too? Okay, all right.
Yeah,
Well, right, there's state laws that address ethics and, for government officials, and you would be covered by that. There are other, municipalities that decide to create their own code of conduct. And that's up to each municipality to decide what they want to do. Whether it's enforceable or not is another question. But the idea is to create your code of ethics and expect that everyone that agreed to follow it will follow it. And it generally comports with what, the general law is and the expectations of what someone as a board member or on the plan commission would do to properly complete their job. So, and not get into trouble with the law.
Council,
So I think all this comes down to training, really. I mean, I think people are always trying to figure out a way to help train people because you don't have a lot of time. You get thrown into a role and it's complicated. And you all have other jobs. And you saw the volume of information that Jennifer sent out. I saw it as well. And it's all, excellent resource materials. But that's really, if you're in this role, you've got to commit yourself to making sure you do it right. And that means proper training. And I think
Who enforces it and who interprets the enforcement?
the enforcement of.
There's code of conduct. Code of
You
conduct.
have a code of, really, yourselves. I mean, it really is,
But I mean, we have the state statute that
Right,
we're.
if you have I mean, there are a couple of state statutes that address, conflict of interest. And, those would apply to.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that from the code of conduct, we have to follow certain rules and procedures. Does that mean that Joe violated if he would have signed it 2 months ago, it was a violation because he didn't clarify something correctly in his motion? What I'm saying is who's enforcing or interpreting whether the code of conduct would, if we went down that road, who's enforcing that?
If it's the plan commission, you would as a group. Right. If it's the board, it would be the board. It's just, it's the rules that you're going to follow as a group is really what it is. And again, like I said, I think I don't know where the idea came up with. I know a lot of communities do it, but I think it's primarily a training tool because if you get someone to sign something saying, here's the rules, then they keep that with their notebook when they show up at meetings and it's fresh, in their minds as to what their role is. So that's probably why.
How about some training first?
Yeah, so we have a safety manager at Wassa Supply that sends out training material on a weekly basis. And he requires anybody that reads it, well, everybody has to read it and they have to sign that they read it. And it's like, I am so against that the reason to train is to help somebody. It's not a punishment. I mean, that's the way that I perceive it is I'm going to make you do this and sort of thing. And I really appreciate what you sent me. So I did take the time 3 hours of videos today. And again, I look at that stuff as helpful to me.
Mm-hmm.
And you were all given the opportunity to attend those. So
Right.
every year I get a list and it comes back, you would have gotten it at the first of the year. And the only ones that took me up on it were Mark and Lauren. So
I've only done 2 and Lauren's done a lot more, but I'll tell you, the 2 that I was on were excellent.
I thought though, the conducting of electronic meetings was very informative.
That's another one. Yep.
And, Mr. Cronin, I'm sorry,
Just, so you said you aren't asking us to sign anything?
no, this is just all here
For
for
example.
discussion,
Right.
examples, just so that if you had any questions right now,
Well,
this is all things.
The
that
question
this-
is, should the plan commission reaffirm the plan commission code of conduct as adopted by 6/11/2018 and signed by each 2018, 2019 plan commissioner? So you're asking if we should reaffirm that code of conduct. And then it says recommendation, director recommends approval. So what I'm getting out of this is you are asking us to sign something.
Well,
She attached 2 old packets.
Yeah, those are.
Okay.
There's actually 2 old packets. There's no recommended motion for, that was 2019.
My first one is on 175. Those were just attached as attached documents that you're looking at.
Okay,
So that was just explaining the history for some that were here and some that weren't. So basically what I did was 2 weeks ago, I took the email that I sent you when you first got on the plan commission and I updated it for Roy and for Gail. And then because we had attended these and I was given copies of these, I included that on there and sent it to everybody because I thought it would be a good refresher for those that weren't there. You had already gotten a copy of the role of the plan commissioner, I believe, because we had access to that before, but I don't know who watches things and who doesn't.
Mr. Kimmer?
I would like to ask Mr. Eady right now a question, because I think you and I talked about this today. And I think we need to spew, anybody that's on this committee we need to have an open conversation and air some shit out. I'm just being frank. And I don't know how we can do that. We're all in here tonight. There's nobody publicly, but I'm sure it's recording. Yeah. But can we do this without having people? Can we do it privately? So it's just us in this room.
No.
I mean, if the closed session rules would apply to whatever you want to talk about, then we could, but.
Well, it's indifferences or what I feel that we look, I'll be honest with you, sometimes we feel like she's pulling something that we don't like. I'm just being frank.
And I gotta jump in right away because it's also reversed. It is. You gotta look at it both ways. There's times where, we feel being courted by the plan,
And it's about time that shit needs to be thrown out on the table and straight
staff
out.
feels the same way that
That's
I'm
right.
sure they're wondering sometimes where I'm coming from. I'm sure they are.
Well,
And-
we all are. And you know
all of
what?
us.
Let's throw it out on the damn table and clear it up.
Well, I think most of the conflict probably comes from the code.
Yes.
And if you don't like the code, then part of your job as the plan commission is to recommend changes to the board, to the code. And the staff is tasked, their job is to apply the code as written. And so if there's a conflict, it might be because they're trying to apply the code as they understand it, and you may not think it's reasonable, and it might not be. But if it's not reasonable, yeah, we have to change it. It's not, they're gonna, whatever the code says, they're obligated to follow.
I get it. I
And
love their position.
we have a code that, I know, some people thought it's too much of a big city code. All right, and some people may think it's not restrictive enough. It's on the eye of the beholder. But if you don't like it, then you should recommend changes.
And I just wanted to be able to have communication with everybody on that, because I think when you go back in history here to see where the administrator before, those codes were in place, but just leave them alone. You don't touch them. This is what we're gonna do. And then all of a sudden that administrator goes to a different one, and now all of a sudden it's like all hell's breaking loose. Everything's falling by the book and enforced. So that pissed a lot of people off in this community. It really did. It caused a lot of grief and a lot of anger against the municipality. And I think a group of us people were trying to get that cleared up. But right now, there's still some animosity. I just would like to get, I think it would be best to air it out and understand that we're all in the same damn team.
Well, I think you could put on the agenda that you want to discuss, potential changes to the code. And then have your discussion about what you think needs to be changed and why.
And I think we've discussed that several times, man. And I've charged with commission members with read the code. I know it's a royal pain in the neck to read the code. And some of us have read it and said, hey, I hate to call you out, but Joe's really good about finding sections of the code that says, hey, we should change this. And he brings it forth. It is very difficult. I was on the original zoning steering committee, and so was Joe in 2015. 13, that long ago already?
Yeah, we started in 13.
That's where you got your gray hair. So it was quite a part. We also worked with the code with Chrono Winter, so we were trying to match our codes so they said a lot of the same things because we were all dealing with the same. One of the things about doing that is that several of our surrounding communities are working with codes that are decades old. And we were one of the first communities to upgrade. Granted, it looks like Dane County zoning code or Madison zoning code. But when you read it, it's applicable to us and it's modifiable, which this plan commission has done in the past. We've modified parts of the zoning code that we feel didn't apply. And it takes a while to go through that. The other thing that's coming is the board approved a two-chapter book about how to do meetings. And council is still in the process of vetting that. Should be done pretty soon. Was it 40 pages?
36.
No, more than that, no,
Oh, you added some?
because of the citing.
Okay.
It's on my desk for review.
Huh?
It's on my desk to kind of look through the references right now, I think.
Is it?
Yes.
I'm just trying to get my references back, by the way, Counselor.
Yeah.
Or Steve did it. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
And I just want to interject, I mean, I thought a major change when I was on this last time was that the state of Wisconsin passed a law that said if someone comes in and they meet code, you on the planning commission, unless you have some really good excuse or some, you know, I mean, it better be something major.
Right.
You just have to approve.
That was for conditional.
There's no, right, I
For
mean,
conditional rule, if it's unauthorized or use that's in your code that says, hey, they can do this.
But
They
we've
meet
changed,
all-
but parts of the code were changed.
If you.
So certain items that were acceptable before under certain things got changed.
right, I understand, and I think that's the reason for modifying, I mean, I agree that it's really modify the code then if we don't like what it is, and
Right, the conditional use permit process is very favorable for development of property. And that's because of the state law in 2017 that said you can't have plan commissions that just decide to deny it just because.
They don't like it.
the Howard.
Not in my neighborhood or whatever.
The Howard Young.
So they required every code to have objective criteria for what you need to be able to get a conditional use permit. And then if the person can meet those standards, which is part of what your job is to determine whether they meet the standards, then you listen to the public. And if the public has input that might affect the use of that property, or there might be conditions you might want to attach to the use to make it so the neighbors are satisfied, then you have the authority to do that, but you can't deny it.
Well, we have the issue with industrial uses versus we have a segment of our community that hammers home, single-family residential zoning. In my opinion, that's not gonna work. That hasn't worked for a long time. We need more diversity in housing. And Joe points to the issue, that he can't get people to work even though he's offering a pretty good wage because some of the housing issues. Jen talks about the missing middle as far as places that are affordable for working people to live in. And that requires changes in our thought about, we are a single-family residential community. No, we're not anymore, and that's not the generations that are coming, at least behind me.
So let me ask you guys a quick question. Staff, Joe, Steve, yourself, you're new with this, I mean, you've been on it before, but sometimes when we'll get a call from a person, and obviously it's always difficult when they're grumbling about, hey, I need some help, why am I getting turned on, or why is this taking me 6 months to get through planning? Immediately, right away, it's them, it's their fault, right? That's how we feel, or the outside feels that way. We have to somehow get on the same page with them and understand there are regulations that we are putting in place and we're requiring, and we have to be okay with those, I guess.
Many times they've never called us, so we're not aware that there's an issue. Because there are certain people in the community that will just go to either committee members or board members. So we don't necessarily know that's going on until somebody, so I guess what I would ask is that you
Have you talked
refer them
to?
to us or ask that question.
Most of the time, if I'm just referencing, if I get it, it's usually somebody that's pissed off, that's left the staff, or has been working on a plan for 5 months or 4 months and they can't get anything done, or they feel like they're going through hoops. So, and again, a lot of that stuff's been in the past. I know everybody's been trying to make a great effort to try to make it better. I think everybody is trying their best. I'm just trying to figure out how we can get all of our issues, if we have issues, throw them on the table and understand that Jen and Emily aren't also I have a different viewpoint on it today, that there may be, you know, we sit here and we're concerned about signing something tonight with a code of ethics or following the rules. I can't imagine how they feel every day when it comes in. And no difference if we were in that position, you gotta give them everything it is, because you can't treat one person any different than the next person. Otherwise, I just said that tonight,
Yeah.
you're setting yourself up for a lawsuit. So, I just wanted to try to have some time where we could either figure it out and have Jen and Emily be open and say, well, then if there's issues that we have problems with, because if it wasn't Schofield Avenue, I have issues with that whole percentage all around the damn building. Because it gets to be cost. How do we bring people in? Oh, well, you're gonna put a subdivision?
But I think that's where Matt was talking about, that maybe if it's unseen, we need to clarify that it can be 0%. Yes, if it's unseen.
I mean, you saw the exception there, so the code's gonna have exceptions, you just gotta,
Know it.
you gotta find it.
Know it.
You gotta know it.
It points it out.
But I tell you what, I mean, you've got a lot of experience up here, and what would you like to see on a project if you were the developer? You know, how would you like to see the process? Now, keep in mind, obviously, we want, we wanna make sure that the buildings are gonna raise the value. Right, I mean, it's so, but what process would you like to see? How quickly can we make it? Can it be more streamlined? That's all part of the ordinance. So if you wanna change that process, develop a new ordinance.
Yeah, I think if we all had all day to work on it, we would probably have done it right. That's the beauty of it. It's hard.
That exception was actually added in January after those discussions.
This one here.
By us?
Yep, that was in the January, that
Oh,
was
wow.
updated along
That's
with
those,
the-
that's
Sounds like
all
the
those
process
changes.
worked.
Yeah, so that's great. That's great.
But you have to go through the process,
Right.
it's the other thing that you have to realize.
So you
You
can't,
have to have paper trails on things because,
You have to have a hearing
Jim was
and
a perfect example, he was going around the village asking why things were the way that they were. So when we're making these staff reports and things like that, sometimes they're not necessarily for you guys and we don't expect you to read them. We expect you to read the front page and things like that, you can delve into the rest of it, but it's really so that we're creating a record of why. So that if somebody comes back, I mean, I've been here long enough that projects from 15 years ago, people are questioning why, and my memory's not as good as it was back then. So we do have a conditional grant form that we've had for many, many years, but maybe we just need to point out to you guys more on it. We've actually filled it out a lot of the time.
it's filled out on most.
It's always filled out.
It's always filled out
We've
first.
done it for you instead of going through the meeting.
so my question is like take a Brian Carlin. Those guys are so freaking nervous to even wanna build anything down here. I mean, and I'm not exaggerating.
They get caught in the middle. We
I
talk
get
to
it.
them all the
I get
time,
it.
and we understand that. They know what the codes are and they're going up against people who are telling them.
Yeah, they can't
I mean,
afford
we've
it,
been
they
hurt.
can't do
We'll
this.
see what we can get by and.
So
they
my
miss-
question to you is on those three that we looked at tonight, those A, B, and C, right? Whatever those three were.
The exceptions for.
Exceptions. So can we offer that to our customer or our client when they come in and we say, hey,
Well, you can, but you have to, what he's saying too, is you guys have to have an idea of what you want, because someone's always gonna ask for less.
Huh.
So you have to remember that your job is for the village as a whole. So, I mean, even if you want certain standards on Schofield Avenue that are different in other, I mean, that's why we made the changes to the industrial park, because it's an industrial park.
Yeah.
So they have different standards there. There was a different look that you want in a commercial area. And some of those people along there, they're upgrading their looks along there. You've got different people who have different ideas.
I think what Gary's trying to say is, if someone comes in and they're not happy with the ordinance, or they wanna do something different, can you give them a list that has those three
We
things and
do.
say, hey, you can file a conditional use permit, if you think you meet this criteria, you can bring it in front of the planning commission and see
that.
the change.
Okay.
So we go through and we do a full review and we tell them where their deficiencies are. They can decide if they want to
But that's those
fix
reports,
it or not.
does not meet, does meet, or.
Well, Gary, are you you're saying training for us, which I actually think Jen and Emily should put on the next 5 agendas. Things on there, that if you wanna look at it, go ahead, if you don't, then don't.
I think it's
And
awesome.
also training for the contractors and the developers around here, and we won't get the ones in Green Bay and Chicago and probably not Raleigh in California, but, you know, we should try to do a luncheon. Keith, I think you've talked about it a few times, I think even Jen's talked about it, and just see what happens. Maybe only one will show up, maybe 8 will show up and have a question and answer. I don't know if we can do that legally. We probably can't have 4 commissioners here. But, you know, at least they could talk to the staff and, you know, have some food and.
I would think you could if you posted it publicly.
The public is allowed.
I'll tell you, you know, just, you know, I got a phone call from Keith Tappy, and I actually should leave, because then you guys will be done earlier. But Keith Tappy, the night he was here with Denian, you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Denian was here, and then Jim Pinasalt got on the phone and was questioning, and that's when I called Jen the next day to find out, did I have some power, did I let that go too far? And I could have called Lauren too, I guess. And then she helped me. But, so then I made a point to call the Denian guy, and I'm sorry, I don't know his whole name.
Heath Tappy.
Okay. Who?
Heath Tappy.
No, I know Keith Tappy. The other guy over in.
Jeff Marge.
Jeff Marge, okay, so I called him first. Then I called Heath and had probably a 45-minute conversation, excellent conversation. I can call him anytime now. But in the middle of this thing, he references Keith and says, the only reason I'm here building in your village right now, because I was done building here, is because Keith Donner called me about 2 years ago, whenever you took your current position. And you called him and basically welcomed him back, cold call. And he says, nobody has ever done that before. Well, I called Keith up and he says, you sure it was me? No, I'm just kidding. He really did.
We give him a lot of credit.
You know, he did, and he remembered it. But, you know, I think we both couldn't believe it.
Barnett Farm at the time.
Oh.
I was trying to find out.
So that was, I'll tell you, that made me feel really, really good when he said that. And we had a really good conversation about costs and affordability and, you know, hey, I gotta make some money too. And anyway,
So I would say,
I'm really gonna leave it because I'm gonna keep on talking. So.
We appreciate you being here, Mark, we do.
Yeah.
We do, sit down.
sit down, please.
All right, I know, but it's 8 o'clock.
That was aggressive, Joe.
Yeah. Study up.
A little code of conduct here, Joe.
I want to tell you that tonight we had a difficult thing to get through, but there has been a sea change, a cultural change that I view with the staff in that it always was the power of no. And that before Emily got here, some of the other guys, when they read the code, they interpreted it as black and white, and you can't do that without offering some sort of, well, no, you can't do that, but there was no consultative type of help. That has changed significantly. And I appreciate the fact that Jen continues to push us. If you don't like it, do something to change it. And obviously, we're dealing now with how to change it correctly. So to me, this is all about not how much work we have to do. There is work to do, no question about it, but there's been a lot done already that I really appreciate.
Yeah, I agree, Joe. It's come a long way.
Any other comments under 11? Or is there anything else we have to add? We talked about discussion of future meeting agenda layouts.
It was just if you want to see a change to have it kind of separated, or if.
I was gonna ask, plan commission, do you have a real heartache about how our agendas are laid out? Do you think there should be something? I mean, if we don't have a suggestion, I have seen different layouts. In fact, I think that's why you provided those.
The only thing I would say is if we have the ability to rearrange the agenda to take care of people that come for a specific thing.
First,
how do you go about doing that?
We can just, as a chair, I can set up the.
Yeah, I think on the Madison one, there's something like that. One of them, there says something like that they can rearrange the agenda to any.
So like a reminder? Like a reminder right
It's
up
like-
front that says,
Yeah.
does anyone?
Oh, yeah, it said that they could pick anybody, there was no course, it was if they were here.
rolling agenda or something
Yeah,
like that.
they could call, it wasn't in chronological or numerical order. They could call you whenever and say, okay, we're gonna pick the subject to get them out there. Yeah.
If you
It's
have a
on
bulk,
there somewhere.
yeah, if the bulk is here, why don't you do them first, not have to make them wait?
You had mentioned adjourning between different public hearings. I don't see a reason to do that. Does anybody? I mean, I think we do a pretty good job of separating our.
I can tell you, having been past experience, that when you close the hearing and somewhere down in the agenda, you've had 2 or 3 more agendas, let's face it, you forget what went on, because you don't have minutes to remind you of what went on in the first hearing. But I think it's when it's fresh in your mind, I think it's a better way to deal with discussion and taking action. And then put it away, bring up the next one. I mean, I'm a one at a time person, I don't know. I can multitask, but not.
Then it doesn't keep the person in the crowd waiting.
Correct.
Under the 2 public hearings tonight, did I notice a difference?
Yeah,
That staff talked and then not?
Yeah, we had talked
applicant?
about that
Oh.
before to give like a presentation after I watched the Stevens Point one. Because sometimes if staff can kind of lay it out and then the applicant can talk first, sometimes that answers the questions that people have in the audience.
So have the person that it pertains to be in your umbrella with staff report?
So
That's what
basically,
happens.
staff report, and then what Lauren would do would be have the applicant, if you wanted to add anything to it, because then that might take care of some of the questions, because before, if it just opens up the hearing and staff really doesn't say anything, somebody will ask a question that could have already been answered
Well,
as part of
Good
that.
point.
and
So once the public comment section is like tonight, you had called on, I think it was at Brian.
Brian Carl.
Yeah, you had called on him after we had closed the public. And I kind of saw you sitting there shaking your head like you shouldn't be doing that, but if there's clarification that we want is something when while we're having our discussion, I guess I don't understand
That's
why we
okay, but
should.
the issue is, after a while, it gets to be a debate.
It gets to be too much, okay, I see what
It's
you're
a
saying.
debate, because the time that's set aside after the hearing is done is discussion and action by the planning commission. If you want clarification questions, that's fine. I don't see a
Do
problem.
you need to clarify that you're just asking that one individual and it's not, nobody else can speak?
Correct, it's not, in other words, you're actually opening the hearing up again, if you're doing that. If you have a specific question that you didn't quite get answered by either the petitioner or the staff, ask them a specific question. But if it starts the back and forth, technically, that's not supposed to happen during our deliberation. We're like a jury doing deliberations. You never see any more testimony offered during a jury's deliberation. When the presentation, defense and prosecution is done, then it comes to the jury. No more information comes. So if you want to look that stiffly at it, yeah.
Yeah, but the juries often ask questions, do they not?
Clarification questions.
Of the judge.
So maybe we need to do a better job of making sure that we have a full understanding and have all of our questions asked before we close.
but that's never gonna happen.
Something's gonna come up.
You guys as a group, how you do that, okay? If you open it up again, all right, then you gotta be fair. So if you ask a question of someone and then someone else has a question of someone else, you are kind of opening up a mini public session again to allow for anyone that has any other questions up here of any witness to get that clarified too.
So the proper way, Mr. Eady, would have been to say, Jennifer or Emily, is there a fence on this property? I should have asked them.
I think that would have been, well, I think you can ask whoever, but I think that comes down to the whole group here deciding whether they're gonna open it up to allow an outside person to provide information.
There's so many changes that happen on that job site,
Yeah.
okay? From day one, and now we don't see this fence plan, because we don't have site plan, so I didn't understand, in order for us to make the decision that we allowed the back to not be compliant with the percentages, and the side, we had those talked about earlier on, but those were 2 plans earlier. So the clarification I was trying to get is the fence still here, or is that gone, or, so otherwise that would have made a different decision on my part of how we would have reacted.
And I know, like tonight, you guys were Emily and Jen were trying to kind of cover your tail and get clarification from us on the Patriot Auto situation. But I think sometimes when I look through the forms, we get bogged down in so many words and so many little details that I lose sight of what we're actually trying to get changed or what needs to get approved. And sometimes having a little synopsis maybe of what exactly has actually changed on top of everything else would help me to understand at least what we're trying to, I don't know about anybody else, but
That one wasn't confusing.
that one was pretty confusing. I got so lost reading that.
I agree very much on the motion, and Lauren's been trying to push that for a while. But, you know, talking to Keith and sometimes Jen, and I think Michael, is when I hear you say you're reviewing the tapes, I'm going, oh my God, what a waste of time. I'm going, oh, wait a minute, they're trying to get clarification. So the waste of time actually started with us. On any committee, any commission, or the board of trustees, when we, especially when I'm flying at the end to try to catch up, and it's just boom, 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 how does anybody expect to put that into a motion? You know, our feelings or our intent. And I think we gotta slow down on that motion and make that very clear, very visible, so staff doesn't have to spend time every week or every month or whatever
Well,
going through.
there's some nice forms. Why can't we have these forms? That we could just start jotting information down on that particular subject if there's forms.
If we write notes, and then whoever does the motion, you'll be able to grab those bullet points.
Or help correct it if it needs to be. And you said that's okay to do that?
Yeah, I think that you said you do like create a form that I think that you give.
There is a
In the
form, we
Yeah.
can print it off.
So I think, yeah, I mean, you have the right to go into closed session when you deliberate in a quasi judicial hearing too. If you put it on your agenda, that you might do that. So you could go into closed session and kind of get, you know, everything straightened away in your heads and then come back into open session and make your motion in a detailed way, you know, with everything in it. Now, really, if you have the final plans that you are approving, then it's easier, right? But if there's always changes going on, that's when it gets really confusing.
I don't think it would be a good idea to go on a closed session.
I don't either.
Not with that situation.
I'm a transparent person.
Yeah,
I
I don't
think
think
at this
we have
level.
It has to conform to the state statute for 1985, whatever, so it has to conform to one of those conditions.
Right, and one of them is deliberating after a quasi judicial hearing. So you could do it, but you don't have to, right? I mean, the law is, it only allows you to do that if you feel like you need to. If there's a lot that you want to talk about, you know, privately before you come out and talk about it publicly, then that's something that you could do if you notice it in your agenda that way.
I've been parts of organizations that do a lot of closed door meetings, and I just think that creates a lot of animosity and.
Well, this is one of those guys doing it.
Correct.
Yeah, I'd rather not do it.
If there's a big issue too, you always have the option to like basically wait and give, you know, think about it for the next month or 2 weeks or whatever and come back, because you have like 60 days to actually make a decision, like the final decision. So if there's things you want to think about or there's things that you want them to come back with. This one was kind of a strange situation because it kept changing. I think it wasn't even in perfect form when it first came, so that's why you saw it so often. We were putting it on the agenda for him, and then we didn't have all the information that we would have normally liked, so that's what dragged it all out too.
I just go back to what you've said multiple times. If you have a plan, it eliminates so much of this, right?
Right.
Well, and the reason we get put under pressure is because usually it's the customer is on a time, you know, in Wisconsin, we understand that you build during certain months and not during others. But the reality is if they're in a hurry, then get in a hurry, right? I mean, sometimes you put yourself in a bad spot by trying to accommodate somebody else's, you know, timing.
But I'm gonna step in and say, I've been on the other side to understand all the things that are required to be turned in. I think Joe Jordan can attest to that as well. It is a lot for, now you pretty much need to hire somebody, an engineer or somebody to take care of those things, because there's a lot more requirements than there used to be at Turner Village.
In fact, when the state does plan approval, you really gotta know your P's and Q's.
Yeah.
Well, we've required all the same things for the entire time I've been here, so a lot of these guys know
Now they're
that.
just generally being enforced more. They really are.
They were all required back then. We had landscaping plans. That was all there. I mean, I went to a meeting on the Friday before Labor Day for someone out in the business park with a landscape plan. I remember having that special meeting. So, I mean, all this stuff was required. We did things in pieces, which ended up not being the best, so we tried to get it all together and done at one time. So we're not chasing things.
Okay, back on the.
Where are we at?
So,
We
Mr.
are
Chairman,
definitely off the agenda.
No pressure to sign and
I'll tell you that.
not asking for anything to be signed.
Well, I think that the point is to inform ourselves, educate ourselves. This isn't, it's not a hell of a thing.
I personally need some more time to go through that because
And that's
the
fine.
last couple of weeks with
Just,
graduations,
I
I have
mean,
just
really
been.
the procedures, is everyone okay with only allowing 5 minutes for people? That's, I mean, those are the things, the procedures, the things that, you know,
as long as the
putting it
person's
out
not-
on the agenda so that people know
No,
that that's
much time.
how, because you guys don't understand that they're not gonna, they don't understand, they come in here scared. because
Well, I was
they
gonna
have to
say,
come
most
in
times,
here.
Jen, they don't say enough, so you guys have to give most of the story because they don't know, and you know all the buzzwords, right? You know what the committees or what the people in the crowd are looking for. These guys come up here, they're scared shitless to get up in front of the microphone, and they're like, well, here's my job, and what do you need to know? Otherwise,
Well, and
get me off of
sometimes
this.
we don't know all of it either. In the case of a conditional use hearing, you have to remember, we don't give a lot of recommendations because we don't know who's gonna come in the door either with something that we don't know
Oh.
about. So that, you know, we'll tell you if it meets the standards, but there's always that wild card that something's gonna come up, someone's gonna have something that maybe sway your opinion.
Yeah,
So,
but you guys do a good job of communicating, you and Emily, what's going on with the project.
right, but if somebody, I mean, it's a public hearing, so if somebody gets something and never calls us and asks a question, it just comes into the meeting, you might not have ever.
But that's a great idea for, at the time as well, if you guys do that presentation like Mark is asking, and then have the customer come up, or the person that's supposed to be representing come up after to answer any other questions, I think that's great, but you guys do a good job of presenting most of the buzzwords and what's required or what we're looking
And
at.
I think they do a good job of
They do a great
presenting
job.
both sides.
Yeah.
So, moving right along, have we, covered everything on 11?
You know, I think one of the things that might be helpful to do is like before the next quasi judicial hearing that you have, kind of put together what a findings of fact should look like. And it's probably a lot like the document that you prepared. And that's really what your motion should be. That's how it should read. It should read that, you know, I move that, that the evidence confirms that, you know, this element, that element, and that element are all satisfied under the village ordinances, and that we approve a conditional use permit with the following conditions, A, B, C. And that would be your motion. So you're covering the bases. Your job is to make sure that the conditional use permit, the evidence, staff is telling you whether they think it meets the code. You're confirming that you've looked at it and it meets the code, okay? Because that's your authority to do that, nobody else's. And then if you are going to apply any conditions to it, you set forth the conditions in that motion as well. And if it's approved, then that's your conditional use permit.
Can I add to that? Can we get could you show us an example of like, could we just reiterate what we did tonight? Like, do it in a form, like on paper, where we would see an example of that, or could we, if we ever get in a situation like that, can we have a handout at our table knowing what?
Yeah, we can print that
Get
out.
that, so we can start writing some of the things that we're discussing. Here, we need to make sure this is in there, this is in there, that's in there. That's a great idea if we ever get in a situation like that again.
Oh, I'm sure we will.
Determination.
Yeah.
That would basically be your record, because it doesn't go to the board anymore unless there's an appeal, so.
Yeah, and that's why, I know we talked about this once before, but, you know, that's why anybody on the board that participates in a quasi judicial hearing then can't participate at the board level. So that would be, I see two people on the board right now. So if you guys, for example, if you would have denied this conditional use permit and it would have gone before the board, then the two of you wouldn't be able to participate as board members because you already participated at this level. So that's the only.
Can't vote on a thing twice.
So they're almost, I mean, you're almost in a situation where it might be better to let just the members of the plan commission handle some of those.
Well, what we would do, we would just.
Recuse yourselves.
No, not recuse, we would just.
What issue?
Abstain.
Or abstain.
On this is just on conditional use permits, correct?
Any kind of quasi judicial hearing. It's gotta be a quasi judicial hearing. So if you're sitting as a judge
Okay.
and you're making a decision, you can't decide, you can't affirm or reverse your own decision as a board member at the
No.
next level.
That would only be if it goes to the board as.
Is it an appeal?
Okay,
So-
so I thought we
right,
actually
right.
went down this road once
Well,
and
if you recommend that we change an ordinance here, that's legislative, so you can participate here and there. But if it's a quasi judicial where you're now a judge, you're calling balls and strikes, here, if you listen to the facts and you vote, now you can't vote on appeal because the appeal per our code goes to the board. So you can't be both judge and, you know,
Judge again.
and judge again on the appeal.
That's only an appeal, so it doesn't stop us from voting up. Something comes from the plan commission, it's not an appeal, it's whatever the plan
When's the
commission.
last time we had an appeal?
We had one with Eastgate.
When?
Eastgate, the Eastgate Apartments was an
The
appeal.
one on Schofield Avenue and.
Probably not gonna happen much, but
It's only, yeah.
It doesn't happen very often, but it's just something it doesn't happen often enough, so you gotta remind, oh, yeah, I voted. And that's why sometimes it's a good thing and a bad thing for board members to be on the plan commission, because at a hearing.
Well, that's the issue that Keith kept saying, to have three on there. I'm just gonna say this, but I actually sought out a different opinion. And that's not the same opinion of another attorney.
well, it's, you know, I'm gonna say the other attorney's wrong on this one.
Okay.
And the only reason they're wrong is because of our appeal process within our municipality. I mean,
Maybe I didn't understand it the way you're saying it
Yeah.
now. I think I got
So-
most of it from Lauren. And maybe it was a little more general and this is a little
Yeah.
bit more specific.
So
Yeah.
it's because of the way the ordinance says the planning commission decides conditional use permits, not the board, okay? The plan commission does.
Right.
But that decision can be appealed to the board and then the board listens to the appeal.
Prior
So-
to that, it went, plan commission recommends it to the
Right,
board,
right.
the board approves it,
So-
and the appeal is the zoning board.
Zoning
Yeah, yeah, so if we had it that way, then you could vote both times because you're not deciding the issue and then deciding the appeal.
You're not deciding the
And just-
appeal.
Right.
Matt, I have not talked to that attorney since you and I had that conversation all the time, just so you know. I'm saying that all wrong.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Are we-
Entertain a motion.
Well, we still have items on the agenda. Staff reports under 12 and 13.
Oh, stop.
I move to approve items number 12 and 13,
Well, Joe's got.
You have a motion by Mr. Cronin to approve.
Wait.
or to acknowledge, not approve.
Go ahead,
So,
hold
so, I thought we were on 11.
Yeah, we're still on 11.
Or I thought we were trying to move this along.
on. If you want. Since there is a commissioner who wishes to speak on previous items and we haven't closed the, I will rule your motion out of order.
Okay, ooh.
Mr. Jordan.
After deliberation and reading the stuff I saw from Jen today, I would make a motion that we adopt the 2019-20 Village of Weston Plan Commission Rules of Procedure as outlined by Jim.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Jordan,
Second.
second by Mr. Mumford. On the question,
On the question, do you want me to bring that back for the next meeting and?
update the date on it, the date at least,
Because those were just,
samples.
previous ones.
No,
Is that-
what am I reading here?
Yeah, so those were in the packet because we used to adopt both of those prior to 2019. It never got adopted, it hasn't been adopted the last 2 years.
So those are just examples.
So those were just examples, and we used to have rules of procedures. So if you want to come up with those or come up with something close by, it helps staff too to kind of define what the process is going forward.
Would you like to amend your motion just to change the date on it?
Or review at our next meeting.
Okay.
There you go.
Do that.
Have that motion.
So
Yeah. So, okay, so what's the motion? I just wanna verify. It changed.
I'm gonna
Mr.
bring back
Eady.
rules.
Valerie, where's Valerie?
Okay. So you're gonna bring it, so that gives us, like, if I wanna review it, that gives me time to review it.
Procedures, it
You probably wanna attend all these meetings, don't you?
Well, he made a motion and then it changed, so I just wanted to confirm what's going on here.
Well, technically, he can change it before the chair announces the motion.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm going to 3 seconds.
We have a motion and a second. Let's see if I get this right, to bring back the,
2019-2020 Village of Weston Plan Commission Rules of Procedure as outlined by Jen
okay,
in this meeting. For review.
we're not gonna automatically sign it, we're gonna review it, at least that's my interpretation. And we have a second. Anything else on the question? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? So carried.
just quick comment on that same, I don't know if I got your email, so can you just verify that you sent?
It would have went to your village account,
Okay,
and it was like.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jenny.
Okay.
All your communication should always be over the.
correct, I've been so busy, I don't know if I got
It
it,
was a
so,
couple weeks ago.
okay.
It went out.
We get that one covered, Joe?
Yes,
Okay.
and the
Anything,
only, the
anything
only
else?
other thing is that in that, I am not including the suggested,
There was another document too.
yeah, the other document was the one that was supposed to be signed,
Code of conduct.
Right.
Code of Conduct. I am not asking her to include the Code of Conduct in this previous
I
motion.
think your motion was clear enough, I think that's just that one document.
Right. You're just clarifying for staff.
I'd like to, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment.
Sure,
Thank you for clarifying that, Joe.
just let butter.
I understood
Clarify.
it prior.
Almost it was an old joke.
All right,
Okay,
so I'm done with 11.
okay, staff reports, 12. I
I,
could take 12 and 13 together if you wish.
sure. I move to acknowledge items number 12 and 13.
We have a motion to acknowledge by Cronin, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Minell. On the question, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So carried. Ms. Galanias.
Emily has a draft of the sign ordinance, almost done. It's an ever-moving target, so.
The one
hope
in-
to have something for you.
To address this issue that we've had about people calling about political signs being up
And
so
just
long.
all signs in general.
All signs in general again?
Yeah,
Make
it's
it more
just,
content neutral.
yeah, it's very difficult to make it content neutral and probably keep some of the standards the way they were. So we're still working through that. We hope to have something to you next month.
Okay.
We're still getting calls about the political sign.
You're painted over, don't worry.
Emails, yeah. I saw that today.
I saw that.
I saw that too. You got painted over.
Yeah.
They do a very good job of painting. No, they were in a hurry.
Yeah.
It's kind of on a busy spot.
I'm still working through chapter 14, with the new system, just so you all know, all the municipal code is now online. So it's very different. You just click municipal code and it goes out, and it's kind of like a searchable, I think Michael had it
You
up
could
there.
search a lot of it, I mean,
But we can also update it from there, and because chapter 14 is so different, I'm having some issues with the new program I'm getting in there. So that I can bring it back to you. I was gonna just bring back the addressing portion, and I can't do that because it's totally updated. So I'm still working through that. We had some more training last week on the new system. But now, I don't know how Mark feels about it, but he actually signs it digitally when it's all
It's pretty cool.
completed. So, and then you can actually see the amended ordinances. They're attached right there.
which is kind of a good idea.
Heather's actually going through and putting the old ones in there, so that'll all be up there. So you can see all the old ordinances and see what changed when.
Because there are some things that we've done in the old code that are code grandfathered in so that it doesn't get kicked out further down the road. If we change the code, what's acceptable 3 codes ago is still, if a structure was built that's conforming at that time, and the code changes to make it non-conforming, it's still,
Right, it helps find, yeah, I actually still reference the 1960 for some projects.
the one that was written on the back of a shovel,
That actually is a pretty good code.
short to the point.
And we do need to bring back the park impact needs assessment back to you. And we will be bringing forth the tip 2 project plan amendment. That'll get started in July.
Okay, next meeting is Monday, July 12th at 6 PM, regular meeting. We'll have to make sure that the public works and utilities is done. Any much from staff?
And we do have some hearings already, so please let us know right away if you will not be in attendance.
Okay, remarks from commissioner members, Mr. Cronin?
Hopefully we'll actually have a chance to read through this before the meeting next month.
It's a lot of work.
I apologize.
That's all
It's
right.
been hectic,
It's a lot of stuff to read.
so.
Mr. Gary?
I'd just like to say thank you for putting that together, and I would be more than excited to, if we can, discuss any future trainings that you would have that are available. I would be more than.
They're kind of done for now, but they're usually in the spring, but yes.
So this book, how big is this book?
It's not too.
Hang on, let me,
200 and some pages.
Yeah.
You ever read Harry Potter?
very easy to read.
Harry Potter's 500.
Which one? Which one? The first one, maybe.
Oh, you gotta read that. Is that front and back?
Planning
It's
Commission.
215 pages.
Test on Monday.
If you have training,
Holy cow.
So
feel free.
there is training sessions that, like the Center for Land Use, that
I saw the links to that.
some of that because of COVID was stopped. So I know Lauren's been to them in the past. They've
We've
had
been to them at
other
Stevens
commissioners
Point.
that have gone. They've had them, they'll have them sometimes, they'll be in Marathon County or they'll be down in Point in the evening. And it's training for all plan commissioners. You'll get plan commissioners from all over the county, Lincoln County. There's different ones all over.
It's kind of interesting to go to those in person because you find out that your situation is a heck of a lot better than a bunch of them.
I'm sure. Jen, could you like pound that in our head when the
Next time I can.
Yes, like,
So,
could you just not send us an email thinking we're gonna, maybe just mention it at one of the meetings? Say the
Cause there's
guys.
different things. There was with subdivision 1, there's different things that.
Yeah, or.
And those are those during the week where you'd have to take, yeah, obviously it's a weekday.
I think it was like 11 o'clock or.
They're for an hour right when you get up. At
Yeah.
11 o'clock.
I had every intention of taking you up on that this spring and it fell off the back burner.
Yeah, and
Fell to
with
the
them,
burner. I
they
just forgot
offer
about
the
it.
recordings, so
Right.
you're seeing the recordings. So
So I-
since I attended and Lauren attended, we had access to those. That's why I shared.
That's
Like
it,
to watch on their own time.
new members
Yes.
attend. There were 2 sessions that I thought were very appropriate for new members. And I mentioned that to you in an email
The electronic one is more or less probably a board discussion.
for everyone.
Just because they would define how we would.
And that came directly from, was it the League of Municipalities or who, which was it? The W Madison, UW Extension?
Yeah, but I think the league was involved in that.
Right.
But yeah, that's through the extension of Madison.
Believe it or not, the newest Robert's Rules of Order does include a short section on electronic meetings.
So that's why it's City of Madison's
Oh,
agenda
exciting.
looks crazy. They actually went through,
It's only
because
1,200.
they were so closed down, that's why they're in the front
That's
of
why I
the
need
agenda.
glasses.
They actually have people like registering. They register to get the Zoom link, otherwise they just can watch. So if they want to talk, they want to register.
They have to,
They actually have to register ahead of time to get that link, that's why they had a pretty expensive, just because they wanted to make sure that they were, giving people the opportunity, because they were so closed down, they had no one in person.
Okay, I imagine it was right downtown.
where did we step off?
No comment.
Okay, Mr. Cronin.
No comment?
Mr. Marnell.
The only one, I meant to mention it when you were talking about the signs that kind of popped up in my head. Did we ever take care of the Sherrill Brothers highway sign? And,
They just haven't applied for it yet.
oh, okay, so they can do that.
They can go through the conditional, or the special exception.
Okay, I was just
They
wondering.
have it
Which
applied.
sign, which sign?
No, they.
The big tall one
Oh,
that's.
they can replace
They can
it.
replace
He
the
knows.
face.
He
First,
just
we
hasn't
can
applied
maybe
for
talk
it
to him and
Keith
say,
or Jen has talked to him already.
Yeah,
Oh,
they haven't
okay.
applied for
Yeah,
it.
no, it just popped up when
Yeah.
had that in here, so.
Okay,
Good Chairman,
years ago, we
Steve.
talked about it.
Mr. Chairman?
Was that?
Good thinking.
Can I want to just say something as a staff. Out of all the talks that Keith and I had on doing all the commissions and committees, I don't know who brought it up, but Roy, you're doing a great job. And thank you for your service. I mean, you came in just running. There was no downtime with you before.
It does help to be.
I just want to publicly say that to you. So thank you very much for saying yes.
okay, having completed all items on the agenda, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
By Cronin, second by Jordan.
So does that make the rest of us plan commission members feel like?
I already think-
Parker or what?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Some carried this evening. In memory, for 2036, Fred, choose the date.